to see things as they are. The medium of that transmission is faith on the part of the recipient and love on the part of the giver. Now, that faith includes love, but it also has to be confidence. And the process of our growth, our path, is the development of aspiration based on determination, and that leads to accomplishment. So therefore, as long as we aspire to the good, we're on the path. So that's a little bit about how we use the term lineage. And next, we need to look at what lineage does. Lineage informs us, lineage helps us, lineage gives us tools and so on. But what is it fundamentally? What is the role of lineage? Lineage is the destroyer of selfishness. Now, nobody likes it when we talk about selfishness. They prefer it when we talk about the false belief in an inherently existent personal self, or all these other very cognitive-oriented terms that allow us to ignore the fact that as we experience pain because of selfishness. Now, the antithesis of selfishness is not, as His Holiness the Karmapa has made very clear, is not self-negation or self-abandonment or any of those things. The antithesis of selfishness is empathy. The problem with selfishness is not that we're concerned about ourselves. The problem is that we're concerned only about ourselves. It's the exclusiveness of it. There's nothing wrong with caring about yourself. In fact, we'll get to it later, but basically that's a whole element of spiritual growth, learning to love yourself. The problem is we don't actually, a lot of times, love ourselves. But we think we do. And because we think we love ourselves and we don't, we therefore absolutely refuse to love anyone else. Not really. We objectify them. When we're in that state, we actually view everything that we see, including people, as objects, as adjuncts to our well or ill being. So therefore, in that state, and I think we can all bring that state to mind fairly easily. In that state, everything we encounter is categorized. We use the term duality, dualization, which is very slick, it's very nice, and it's painless, right? But let's talk about categorization. Getting rid of all duality may be a highfalutin idea for us at this point, but we have to examine our reactive categorization. When I look, I'm going to talk about myself because I'm not going to insult anybody else at the moment. When I look at the world around me, first of all, the first thing I notice is I'm in the middle of it. I am the center of the universe. I can disprove that because if I really were the center of the universe, you would all experience me as the center of the universe, and you don't. Each of you experiences yourself as the center of the universe, which means that none of us are the center of the universe. And we know that, we believe that, but we don't live it. Because when I look around, that's behind, that's in front, that's my left, that's my right, And those are absolutes to me. Even though if I turn around, that's in front, that's behind, that's my left, and that's my right. But right now, I'm facing this way, and the universe works this way. And I can't change that, except by turning around or, whatever. So the first problem I have is that there's me in everything else. So since I am the center of the universe, I categorize everything else into how it affects me. For example, I really like Pellegrino. So this is something to which I'm attached because I would rather have Pellegrino than not have Pellegrino. So that's about me. The existence of that Pellegrino has nothing to do with me. I mean, it's on this table because Sally brought it, which is very nice, but it's not my Pellegrino. There's no such thing as my. Because if that were my Pellegrino, then each of you would look at it and say, my Pellegrino. And you're not. You think, oh, that's his Pellegrino. So therefore, it can't be my, because if it were really my, we would all agree on that. It's very simple. It's just we don't live it. So I react to things that I like, people I like, animals I like, pretty colors like the beautiful shrine and so on, and thoughts that I like, memories, pleasant memories and so on, with attachment. I want more. I don't ever want to be without Pellegrino. I don't ever want to get to the day where I can't have any Pellegrino. I'll accept water, but if I can have Pellegrino, I want that. So therefore, I am not impartial. I am selfish toward that Pellegrino. Then there's a second category of things, and these are things that we don't like, we want to avoid. So, for example, I don't know, I can't think of anything in the immediate environment, but if somebody put a cup of very strong tea without milk in it, I don't generally like strong tea without milk. I would feel averse to it. I don't like it. Now, there's nothing wrong with strong tea without milk. Many people actually like strong tea without milk. I don't. So in my universe, and it's my universe, it's the only one I know, strong tea without milk is yuck. Pellegrino is good. And then there's stuff that I don't care about because it doesn't affect my happiness. So, I don't know, I can't think of anything. Yeah, all right, right now, I don't feel congested. So I don't feel the need of Kleenex. So therefore, I look at that box of Kleenex primarily with apathy. I'm apathetic. Now, there's a little bit of attachment there because I can contemplate the possibility that at some point I might want to blow my nose. But right now, I don't have to. And that's another problem, which is that we're so short-sighted. His Holiness the Jalwang Karmapa was teaching one of those Ivy League universities that he visited several years ago. And he was talking about climate change. And he said that one of the problems, he said we normally think of anger or hatred as our worst problem. He said, but we have one problem worse than that, and that's apathy. Because it is apathy that allows us to see bad things happening and do nothing about it. And he said, and unfortunately, he used the word wired in English. He said, our brains are wired in a funny way, which is that we feel apathetic about anything that's not in our face, even though it could be a great danger. So he used the example of a tiger coming into the room. I think, well, I don't remember which of the three. It was one of those famous places. And he said, we were in, I think, a chapel or something, and he said, so if a tiger walked into this room, we'd all panic and flee. But if I said to you, 100 years from now, there's going to be a tiger in this room, nobody would get that excited or care. Because we fail to think, we even subject future dangers to apathy. So attachment, aversion, and apathy are the three affects of selfishness. That's why Nagarjuna said these three are the sources of all wrongdoing. And anything we do that is motivated by them is wrong, even if it looks good. So for example, I'm blah, blah, blahing about Dharma, and if that's a good deed, it's a mitzvah, right? But if I'm actually doing it because, I think I'm so eloquent, I love the sound of my own voice, that's a wrongdoing, not a good deed. So motivation, and this brings us back again to aspiration. Why aspiration is so important, because it's why are we doing what we do? It's not just what we do, it's why are we doing it? And so lineage destroys selfishness if it works, because we learn through faith and love, we learn a different way to be through the examples of our teachers, through the teachings they give us and the techniques that they teach us. And in the end, what we want to do is be able to live the truth. Nowadays we all say live our truth, and that's very important, but we also want to be able to live the truth. And the truth is, coming back to me, the center of the universe, right? The truth is, I am not the center of the universe. And every time I think that I am, based on the way my senses work and, perspective and all of those reasons, I'm wrong. I'm not living the truth. I'm living in a delusion. It's very trendy and catchy to say that lineage destroys delusion. But we need to accept that our main delusion is selfishness. Now, a little earlier, we talked briefly about the three vehicles. The common vehicle, the teachings common to all Buddhist traditions, and the Mahayana great vehicle, and the Vajrayana. And now we've looked a little bit at the fact that lineage destroys selfishness. But I also mentioned something of which we are all aware of, but I have to mention it, which is that the antithesis of selfishness is not hating yourself. It's actually learning to love yourself correctly. So with that understanding, we can return to the idea of these determination to be free, determination to free all others, and determination to see things as they are. Because these are not simply commitments to kind of cognitive growth or being a good person, but they're actually learning to love properly. As I think everyone knows, and I think we looked at it briefly earlier, to start, we have to learn to love ourselves. If we don't love ourselves, we can't love anybody else. Obviously, we say that, we know that. In this case, I'm quoting His Holiness, the 17th Karmapa, so that gives me the permission to say it, because it's kind of it's a tricky thing to talk about, but we could actually say that the three vehicles are learning to love yourself, to love others, and to love the Guru. The problem is we try to skip steps. We come to Dharma as people not brought up to Buddhism in a culture where Buddhism is a small minority among religious traditions. We come to Dharma because something is bothering us. If nothing were bothering us, we probably wouldn't investigate a religion that you have to go looking for. I mean, I suppose you could bump into it and so on, but basically, you know, your parents weren't Buddhist in most cases. Your family is not maybe mostly composed of Buddhists. So something was bothering you. There's no other reason. I mean, there is a sense of affiliation and feeling comfortable with the cultural aspects and so on, of course. And we talk about karmic connection and so on. But basically, Dharma is not fun. It's work. We don't work without a reason. Well, I don't. I mean, other people may, you know, I mean, it takes one hell of a reason to get me off my... So there has to be a reason. There has to be motivation. We have to be looking, you know. As Kondro Sunam said on the day of the final consecration of the stupa containing Rinpoche's relics, she said that he told her, look, people come to a Dharma center because they're suffering and they want to get better, feel better and get better. That has to be respected. That motivation has to be respected. And, you know, he really, I think he embodied that respect for students, including new students, in an almost unique way. I mean, there are other great masters, but Rinpoche really, really lived that. And so we have to accept the fact that we are, to some extent, when we first approach this path, and for many, many years, and in my case, more than 40 years on, I'm still in that place, we are in pain. And I don't mean that just in the Buddhist sense of everybody is in pain. Well, sure, but there are lots of people who don't feel that they're in pain. They don't notice their pain the way that we must have or must in order to do this work. You know, I'm not going to take ibuprofen unless I feel that I have a headache. You know, I won't. I'm not going to bother to open the jar, which is childproof, so it's hard for me, and, you know, shake out those little things and get the water and swallow, you know. It's not like a huge amount of work, but it is work. I'm not going to do that unless I have a reason. So if I'm here, it's because I'm in pain. Now, I mention this somewhat less than gleeful topic because as long as we're in pain, we need to ask ourselves the question, do I love myself? Do I love myself? Now, this is a very, very tricky thing Because, and Buddhism, of course, we can distort Buddhism. We do it all the time. I do it like 10 times a day. We can turn Buddhism into another blame game. Well, I believe in karma, therefore I'm miserable because I did bad things, therefore I'm a bad person. The logic is false, but very, very common. The falsehood there is the notion of bad person. There's no such thing, because there's no such thing as a person. But we can't see that, let alone live it. You know, we can read Nagarjuna or Chandrakirti and their breakdown, their deconstruction of the personal self. And while we're reading it, it's like, oh, wow, amazing. And then we close the book and it's, boop, it's gone. That's my experience, anyway. So we have to ask the question, do I love myself? Do I care enough about myself to do what will help me? Addictive behavior of any kind, and I practice several addictions, you know. Addictive behavior of any kind, obviously blah blah is one of them. Addictive behavior of any kind is not loving yourself. Because if you love yourself, you care about your future. That's why His Holiness said that when you practice taking and sending, you need to first start with your own future self. Take that suffering away from you later, not now. And this comes down to very simple steps. Like, I know that if I eat, I know there's going to be an incredible dessert today. I mean, we know that. We know this. If I eat too much of it, I'm going to have a really hard time this afternoon. I'll be so sleepy that, you know. So making the choice to eat less rather than more of what will undoubtedly be an incredibly delicious dessert is loving myself. And, by extension, being responsible for my work. You know, in order to do the job that I'm here to do today, I need to be awake. You know. So addictive behavior obviously is not loving ourselves. And this is very, very, very deep within us. I mean, I can only talk about myself, but I have never, ever been comfortable looking at my own face in the mirror. I do it when I shave. And I hate it because I don't like myself. I don't. And I'm admitting it. I'm not saying that's healthy. That's not a good example. It's a bad example. I don't like myself. I don't like the way that I look. I'm okay with the way I smell, you know, but I also wash a lot. But I don't like the way I look. And I hate the sound of my voice, which should surprise you because I talk like endlessly, right? But I cannot stand being in a place where recordings of me translating for a guru or, God help us, me teaching are being played. I'll run away. I hate the sound of my voice. That's, in fact, if I think of, you know, if I try to, as a mental exercise, think about what I hate, I would say the sound of my voice and, you know, to a lesser extent, my face. You know, belly, of course, all of that. But that means I have a problem. That's not right. Because if I hate things about myself, it is absolutely guaranteed that I am projecting that same hatred in my dealings with others. It's improved, and the reason that I'm aware of it is only because it's improved. Over the last 40 years, it has gotten a little bit better as my face has gotten uglier, you know. But that's the way it works, you know. You can't have everything. It's gotten a little bit better so that I'm able to, at least to acknowledge it and deal with it. I used to actually run away from people with cameras. I used to actually flee. And the instinct is still there. As long as we suffer, as I do, from that kind of limitation, that kind of distortion or attitude, let's just say attitude toward ourselves, that limits our ability to love others. So we can't skip dealing with this stuff. Our devotion or love for the Guru, and devotion is love, it's appreciation, but it is very much an emotional feeling. Our devotion for our Guru and our devotion to the well-being of others are limited by the limitations of self-love. And on a profound level, we deal with this through the practice of the generation stage and so forth, as you know, but I'm not talking about techniques today. And you've all received, to varying degrees, training in that. So, the starting point of the path has to be, and in the case of hard cases like me, has to continue to be learning to love yourself, learning to forgive yourself. Because if you are a jerk, and I'm going to use myself as an example, if you are a jerk, you won't stop being a jerk until you forgive yourself for being a jerk. Because as long as you don't forgive yourself for being a jerk, you have the idea, I'm a jerk. And because we live in denial of impermanence, which is constant change, then we think, if I'm a jerk, then I'll always be a jerk. You know, it's like one of the things I hate most about shaving in the morning is, again, back to the mirror, is that my denial of impermanence is so strong that I'm always shocked by how old I am. Shouldn't be shocked. You know, I know how old I am. But I am. Like, whoa, that's nasty. I mean, nobody should have to see that first thing in the morning, you know. So I've started having coffee before shaving and showering so that at least I've got some kind of drug in my system to ameliorate that shock. It's just like, oh. And it happens every day. I mean, I should know, right? Yeah. And in my dreams, I'm often much, much younger. Well, that's a whole other thing. So, at whatever point we are in our path and whatever our practice may be, we do have to pay attention to our attitude toward ourselves. And by learning to love ourselves unconditionally, no matter what we look like in the morning, no matter what our voice sounds like, no matter what our thoughts may be, to love ourselves unconditionally is the only possible basis for real unconditional love of others. I'll give you an example, again, talking about myself, which I obviously love to do. I hated my parents when I was a kid. Well, my father not so much, but he died when I was 9, so I didn't get much chance. But I hated my mother. And it took me a long time to realize that, you know, and there was nothing wrong with my mother. I mean, she was actually a really interesting person. That I hated her because I hated me. I hated myself. And I couldn't stand the fact that, you know, anyone who gave birth to me must be like a monster. I hated myself so much that this extended to my parents. Well, I got over it, sort of. But that's how we are. If we hate ourselves, we're going to project that hatred on the world around us. Because as long as we think we're the center of the universe, and it's the center that we hate, everything else is mine. My friends, my Sangha members, my Dharma brothers and sisters, my. And if the me who possesses my is an object of hatred to us, we are naturally going to hate those things or persons whom we take to be, basically our tchotchkes, our things. That's automatic. So we can't really begin. We have to learn to see, they say first imagine the Guru as a Buddha, then you see the Guru as really a Buddha, and then you learn to see your own mind as Buddha. But before we do that, we need to learn to love ourselves and forgive ourselves. And until we do that, any attempt at devotion will be compromised. Because at some point, we're going to project ourselves onto the Guru, onto the Sangha, onto the environment, onto everything. And if I hate myself, and I'm projecting onto others, I'm going to dislike others because they're my projections. And deep down, I know that. So devotion actually has to begin with loving yourself. And there are many ways of approaching this. The most traditional way is the study and contemplation of Sugatagarbha, Buddha nature, because that's absolute. That undercuts, if you start to understand that, it undercuts any of your history that you're uncomfortable with. No matter what you did, no matter who you are, no matter what you've said, your nature is already Buddha. That is a fact. It has to be studied and contemplated. It's not something that you can just take on a statement. But that's the most important thing for us to begin with, and that's why, obviously, in the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, Lord Gampopa starts there. Before he gets into any of the bad news, like impermanence and all this stuff, and describing all the hell realms and whatnot, first chapter is about Sugatagarbha, Buddha nature. And he goes into the 3 different proofs of Buddha nature, which we can talk about later if you want to. But most of you've known that stuff for a long time. So, in a sense, we could say that the 3 vehicles are learning to love yourself, others, and the Guru without conditions. A couple of last topics. We talk a lot about Samaya, and the word Samaya means something like a contract. So I think it's used in some contexts, at least, in the business community, in places where the Indian language is spoken. So because the Samaya sounds like a contract, and contracts have small print and lots of clauses and whatnot, we tend to worry about Samaya. And we're told, if you've received empowerment, you don't say so and so many Vajrasattva mantras every day, you're going to go downstairs with hell in a handbasket. His Eminence Gotchen Rinpoche has been vociferous in explaining that Samaya is love. Love, not obligation. Now, in a sense, we could say that we're obligated to love. I'm obligated to love myself, which, as I've mentioned, I have failed to do. I'm obligated to love myself because I am Buddha. The nature of my mind is as great as anything in the universe, and that's true of each and every one of us. There is nothing better anywhere than your mind right now. Your mind is everything, it's complete, it's perfect, and it is completely flawless. We just have to learn to see that, which evidently takes some of us, like me, ages. But so that's the starting point. So in that sense, I am obligated to love myself because I deserve to be loved. And I'm obligated to love other beings in the umpteen reasons, every being's been your mother and so on. But the deep down reason is because each and every other being is also Buddha. They're perfect. Absolutely perfect. If I look at you and I don't see perfection, that is clear proof that I am living in delusion. If I see anything other than perfection in any human being, animal, or spirit, then I'm deluded. So yes, I'm obligated to love everyone because love is the natural affect of the mind's perfection recognizing itself in others. Many years ago, Bardo Rinpoche taught the Khenpo Kunpel's commentary on the Way of the Bodhisattva. And one of them, many people here have studied it in study groups and so on, and I urge everyone to read it. And if you've read it, I urge you to read it again. But Khenpo Kunpel makes certain things that I had never seen clearly explained, so clear. And I'm not going to talk about that, but one thing that he does is he explains the value of prostrations. Rinpoche was teaching this, and I said, man, I've done 500,000 prostrations, and I never knew this. Why did we not learn this back then? And he just went, because, it's like, I wish I knew that. But so the thing I want to talk about is when we talk about the twofold omniscience or two wisdoms of a Buddha, they're called, you can translate them any way you want, but basically the wisdom of knowing what there is, or the extent of things, to make it sound a little nerdier if you need it, and the wisdom of knowing how things are, or the nature of things. And as His Holiness taught many, many years ago, the 17th Karmapa taught many, many years ago to a group, I don't forget where it was. He said, most Buddhists think of the wisdom that knows the extent of things as literal omniscience. So in other words, that the Buddha would know the population of Philadelphia and, everything else. But he said that's not the most important aspect of it. He said, so you don't need to believe in that. If you don't believe in that, that's fine. You don't need to believe that the Buddha knows, I don't know, how many, leaves there are on each tree out there. Most Buddhists believe that, literally. I'm tempted to actually believe it because I've seen some amazing stuff, but nothing to do with me. But that being said, the most important thing, as Khenpo Kunpel says, is that they know the extent of Buddha nature. And what does that mean when push comes to shove? The Buddha's knowledge of how things are is that the Buddha's mind is pure awareness that sees itself exactly as it is. And that's what we're trying to develop, right? So that is the knowledge of how things are. The knowledge of what there is or the extent of things is that the Buddha can actually see that same pure awareness, that same Buddha nature in the heart of each and every other being. So a Buddha knows his or her own Buddha nature directly, and also, because they're fully awakened, knows directly that same Buddha nature in everyone else. That's what Khenpo Kunpal, I mean, obviously I'm not word for word, but basically what he explains. That's extremely helpful. Because it bridges, if you think about the implications of that, it bridges the gap which we imagine there to be between wisdom and love. That wisdom is perfect love. That perfect love is perfect wisdom. Okay, so that's one thing. So therefore, I don't know how I got onto that, but anyway. So therefore, fundamentally, our obligation, our Samaya, is the obligation to love. To love ourselves, to love all others, and naturally the Guru, because the Guru has given us these tools, let's say, by which we know we can get better, and has pointed us in the right direction so that we have the right aspirations. So in other words, because of my gurus, I don't seek to realize a true self of persons. I don't believe there is one. I don't seek to become the most powerful person in the world, because I've been taught by my gurus that there's, in the one case it's pointless, in the other case it's worse than pointless. I have not realized what my gurus have realized, but I want to. I'm trying. Okay. So, as Garchen Rinpoche famously said, Samaya is love, not obligation. And then finally, the last point about lineage in general is the issue of sectarianism. We're going to talk about this a little bit in a positive way, not a negative way. I'm not going to go on a rant against sectarianism, unless I have too much coffee, and then that can happen, but I'll try tomorrow. But tomorrow we're going to talk about the difference between sectarianism and focus. But to give you a preview, since we're talking about lineage in general, the Buddhist teaching is always defined, or often, as a middle way in view and conduct. The middle way view, of course, has many, many levels of sophistication. Basically, the view of any Buddhist school is avoiding the superimposition and denial. Superimposition is the belief that things that do not exist, exist. Denial is the belief that things that do exist do not exist. The exact opinion of each school and sub-school and sub-school as to what exists and what doesn't, that's a gradual topic, and that's not what we're dealing with. Although if you want to talk about it this afternoon, I'll do my best. But the point, the approach, is consistent throughout all Buddhist schools and vehicles. And that approach is the recognition that we need to deconstruct reality. We need to question our own thoughts. We need to question our own perceptions. And that approach of deconstruction carries all the way from the most basic teachings of the Sravakayana, the vehicle of the listeners, all the way up to the highest reaches of Bhakti Yoga, or Dzogchen. So, in terms of view, the key is sophisticated and gradually learned and practiced deconstruction. In terms of conduct, we try to avoid extremes also. The Buddha taught that mortification, thinking that you can purify yourself by hurting yourself is extreme and unhealthy. And he taught that indulgence doesn't work. I think Oscar Wilde famously said the only way to deal with desire is to fulfill it or something like that. But we know that doesn't work. I mean, it doesn't work. It's like salt water, So what the Buddha taught was, you need to eat. You need shelter of some kind, depending upon your climate. You need clothing or whatnot. But you probably don't need as much as you think you need. But don't neglect your needs, your real needs, in the names of spirituality. You cannot punish yourself into enlightenment. So that's sort of the basic generic definition of middle way view and conduct is throughout Buddhism. So the same thing applies to lineage. We need to avoid two extremes. One extreme is sectarianism. I am Bardo Rinpoche's disciple, I therefore repudiate all other masters. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not healthy. The other extreme is lack of focus. Lack of focus can be a problem for Vajrayana practitioners who receive a lot of teachings and do a lot of, if you've done long retreats, especially more than one, and done different practices, you can end up with a burden of things that you've been told or believe you need to do every day. And the problem with that is you end up doing a lot of very little. Like that show, Master of None, which isn't about that. I'm just the name of it. Third season is very different. So where's the middle ground? In one of the writings of Zhonggung Lodrü Tai, in the context of a different lineage, so this proves that I'm not actually walking my talk, but he says that it's actually, and he's quoting an early master of one of the Kagyu traditions, he says actually having too many practices, too many teachers who are your spiritual director, and trying to practice too many different methods can be an obstacle. Now, I know this is going to get me in trouble somewhere, but hey, I'm already in trouble everywhere, so that's fine. Atisha famously said when he came to Tibet, and initially he wanted Marpa to be his translator, and Marpa refused. Lama told that story. Lama Tratop told that story a couple of weeks ago, I think. And so he ended up with a great Tibetan translator. What was his name? Famous one. Yeah, I'm blanking. Anyway, so this guy had already received a lot of teachings from great Indian masters. And Atisha said to him, he said, wow, you know so much that I think I've wasted my time by coming all this way because you don't need me. You know everything. And then they were talking, and then the guy showed him his shrine room, and he had separate shrines for, one for his Kriya Tantra practices, and one for Charya Tantra, and one for Yoga Tantra, and one for Nutra Yoga practice. He said, and he said, do you practice all these separately? He said, yes, I keep everything completely separate. Every practice completely separate. I don't even use the same shrine for them. And there could be some justification for that because the rules vary and so on. And Atisha said, all right, I didn't waste my time. You guys need me. Because you have to know how everything is all about one thing. And so Atisha made that or is supposed to have in that conversation, made the remark, in India, we meditate on one deity, realize 100. Here you meditate on 100 without realizing even one. So the key to the borderline between sectarianism and becoming scattered or unfocused is you practice what works. You practice what works. But that doesn't mean that you fail to appreciate the kindness of teachers who taught you other things. Because that's all been part of your growth process. So be non-sectarian in attitude, but be very, very focused in your practice. Because your practice, your formal practice, is solely, you do it solely, so you can become a Buddha more quickly and help others. Yes, we also pray for others in the context of our daily practice and so on. But the main purpose is to become awakened. And so what works for you as an individual practitioner is your responsibility to maintain. Your obligation to practice is your obligation to nourish and gradually unveil your own Buddha nature. All right, wow, okay. Let's chant the brief dedication this morning and then we'll do the full one. So page 7, just the first stanza, and we'll do the full one this afternoon. Sunam diye tamche zikpa nye thobne nye pe dranam pamjene che ga nachi balap trukpai sipe sole drowa show. Thank you and bon appetit.